Yeah, like thanks for having us. It's a pleasure to be here and to discuss our projects with a pretty wide-ranging audience. Just as a quick background, the image you can see here on the cover of the presentation is actually the open pit mine, small open pit mine that's sitting on the Tarcoola project. As you can see, a very sort of competent brownfields open pit in very good condition, but very, very shallow, which is one very interesting aspect, which we'll discuss. By way of quick background, for those who are not familiar with Barton Gold, we were assembled as a company about 4 years ago and went together and putting together basically a pure play, pure gold exploration and development proposition in the Central Gawler Craton of South Australia. So this is obviously a very richly mineralized jurisdiction, a very structurally interesting jurisdiction, but one that has been historically underexplored. So we put together about a 4,700 square kilometer tenement package on which we have about 1.1 million ounces in gold resources. And we also have 100% ownership of the region's only gold mill. Now, that said, I think one thing that's really important for us to emphasize is that we're focused on large scale development. So we're not focused on a near term or small scale mill restart. Rather, we're looking at establishing a new large scale independent gold producer. So what we're looking now is basically large scale innovation driven exploration to bring this region back to life, establish multi-million ounce resource bases, and then commence production through multiple mills. So from a corporate standpoint, we've got an excellent team, which I'll take you through in a minute. We've built very, very strong stakeholder and government relations, which are of course essential to this type of mission. And we're very well capitalized. We have about $11.6 million in cash as of the 31st of December, 2021. And that is going to see us lean into the exploration successes that we have had since our IPO 7 months ago. And that's going to probably most notably include another 20,000 meters of drilling to kick off around April. So when we think about this development strategy that we're talking about, it kind of helps to put this in perspective and look at our asset package and the concept of hubs. We mentioned that I mentioned that we're focused on large scale exploration and large scale development. And what that means is we have a really strategic focus on our southern hub, and that southern hub is the Tarcoola and Tunkillia projects. So these are two large-scale projects, two very large-scale mineral systems that our work has demonstrated to have considerable exploration upside. They sit about 70 kilometers apart from one another. So the opportunity to develop them together is very, very significant. And what we're doing is focused on leveraging a lot of new technology, sometimes existing that can be applied to new terrains, or novel technology that's sort of changing the landscape in exploration, to really focus on bringing up a large footprint of mineralization on these projects. And the objective there, of course, is to convert large-scale resources and create a large-scale base for significant future production. In our northern hub, we do have that existing mill. It is a 650,000 ton per annum plant. It was operating as recently as September 2018. Very efficient plant with very efficient recoveries, have fairly limited refurbishment costs. And there's about 320,000 ounces of joint venture gold resources within 40 kilometers of that plant. So there is mineralization that it can tap, but that mill really is leveraged to a much larger play, and that is a development of a new mill in the southern hub. And what I mean by that is, if we were to bring up Southern Hub as a large-scale development, we would be looking at a new mill developed at the Tunkillia project. But what that means is we could use the current mill with the Tarcoola mineralization for a stage one operation, essentially to bring operations and cash flows forward by a couple of years. And Tarcoola and this current mill have worked very successfully in the past. The mill processed that ore during 2017 and 2018 very profitably. So we have a lot of optionality in these assets. The larger that we make any one of these assets, the more interesting its neighbors become. And it's really about basically enhancing our large-scale development options through some smart moves. So what have we done since IPO? Well, we've made a lot of progress. So we formulated some theses, came to IPO with a pretty clear idea of what our opportunities and objectives were, raised $15 million, and we've undertaken about 10,300 meters of drilling along with a bunch of geophysics since IPO. And what that's given us at Tarcoola has been significant open pit depth extensions, as well as 25 shallow new targets that are all within about 1.5 kilometers on the mining lease, which were previously unrecognized. Over at Tunkillia, where we have our 965,000 ounce 223 deposit, we identified or confirmed a new sort of 250 meter long higher grade zone in the middle. And between those two projects, we've identified 3 new gold zones for about 2 kilometers of new mineralization for about a 66% strike increase between the projects. So pretty significant gains across the project from a relatively small amount of work and a small amount of time. On the corporate side, we've also really been building up our South Australian-based corporate and exploration teams. We're undertaking multiple exploration and R&D initiatives, some of which are co-funded by the South Australian government. And we have received about $380,000 in grants from the South Australian government. So really, we're developing a new geological base for the region. We're rapidly growing those footprints, and we're basically laying the foundations for large-scale development in the medium term. We talked about the corporate side of things. Just as a quick snapshot, we have an excellent team. As you can see, a few names here that people might recognize. A lot of South Australian experience, a lot of corporate development experience, and a lot of project development and M&A experience. Very, very tight capital structure, and we are very well capitalized with about $11.6 million. So stepping into the projects now, we'll look at Tarcoola first. This is the project that sits in between our existing infrastructure and the Tunkillia project. This is a collection of tenements. Well, it's 2 tenements of about 1,200 square kilometers. That's right smack in the center of the Gawler Crate in South Australia. And it's actually the site of the historical South Australia gold rush, or the Tarcoola gold rush there, where on our mining lease, about 77,000 ounces of high-grade gold was mined at an average grade of about 37.5 grams per ton in the early 1900s. We've come a long way since then. We've applied a lot of technology, and what that has found for us is a whole bunch of new structures or repeating system of structures and shears, new gold zones, and new targets. And this is what's going to allow us this year to really step out and rapidly expand the footprint of this project from what it has historically been limited to. We'll start at the pit, though, just so everybody can understand what we're talking about when we think about the type of mineralization we see in this opportunity. What we're seeing here, what we're looking at is a cross-section of the Perseverance pit. So this was mined in 2017 and 2018, but only to a very shallow depth. So the pit is about 30 meters deep in the north and about 70 or 75 meters deep in the south. And what our drilling has done has been to identify a significant extension or significant depth increase in the mineralized profile around this pit, particularly as we head to the southwest end of the pit, where we've identified a mineralized extension of about 200 meters below the pit floor. But our drilling has also identified an entirely new gold zone immediately adjacent to the pit wall, and we've called that Perseverance West. Now, that is about 350 meters long, it's shallow, a lot of high-grade intercepts. And what that means, if you look at the cross-section on the right, is that if you're considering a south-southwest extension of this open pit, not only are you going to be looking at what are the opportunities to deepen the pit or broaden the pit, but in a south-southwest extension, you're going to have 2 parallel structures that are providing you 2 paying gold zones in development, which is a fairly unique advantage. Whereas historically they were just mining the one gold zone or the one structure being that deliverance structure. We also have here, if you can see this sort of blue imagery in the cross section, that is a limestone and conglomerate structure that acts as a really high value gold trap for mineralization in this area. And as you can see, we have some very, very interesting intercepts there. So 5 meters at close to 50 grams per ton. 6 meters at 43.6 grams per ton. So we're looking at a potentially very interesting extension of the pit there, potentially some interesting depth extensions. And that extension there, that Perseverance West area, remains open to extension. So we'll come back after that as well in this year's drilling programs. But when we step out, this is where it starts to get really interesting. The mineralization in the pit is very tightly defined by structures. We did a lot of geophysical work before IPO that suggested, including through new ultra high resolution magnetics, that there may be multiple repeats of the type of structures and magnetic circumstances that created that open pit. And we identified a couple of targets, which we've tagged as number 1, 2, and 3 here across our mining lease, which we thought might be, let's say, strong candidates for so-called repeats of that open pit mineralization. Recently, this past year, we have completed ground penetrating radar across the area and validated that indeed where we thought we would have repeating structures or similar setups, we have found those groups of structures as predicted and where we predicted them to be, including the orientation. But we've also identified another 20 or more shallow, interesting structures and anomalies And when I say shallow, I'm talking commencing from 2 to 10 meters below the surface. So we've identified these sort of 25 new targets. They all sit within 1.5 kilometers of the open pit, and they're all in the mining lease. So these are high value opportunities. But again, these really represent just kind of a very small area in a small snapshot of the potential. When we step out now and look at the sort of just again only just sort of the southwest portion of our exploration licenses there, we came with new technology and much sort of more modern seismic technology and reprocessed historical data along with other geophysics. And what that showed us was, one, what the genesis of that actual original high-grade ore was. And just as a reminder, we're looking at drilling intercepts around the pit that are anywhere from 2 to 6 meters at anywhere from 10 to 50 grams per ton. So some very interesting mineralization. We've modeled the perseverance shear there, which delivered that mineralization, passing down through the Tarcoola formation, the Tarcoola basin underneath our tenements, and plumbing directly into large granite intrusives bodies called the Hilterba intrusives. And the Hilterba intrusives are sort of the engines of growth and mineralization throughout the Gawler Craton. They're the same intrusive bodies that propagated Olympic Dam and Prominent Hill and Carapatina, which are very, very well known, predominantly polymetallic assets and copper assets. What we identified, in addition to sort of the genesis of that shear, was another dozen or more parallel and cross-cutting structures, which all pass through that same mineralizing basin rock, and they plumb into those exact same intrusive bodies. So that to us really shows us that it's not just a question of, hey, X marks the spot where we have the existing Tarcoola open pit, but that we may have a dozen or more of these similar styles of opportunities across our project area. And what's very interesting about this is that where several of these structures come to surface happens to correlate perfectly with several targets that we've identified, in particular in our so-called Western targets. Several targets that we had already identified as the areas of highest interest for potential repeats of the mineralization that we found on the Tarcoola mining lease. These are areas like Warburton and Dark Hill and Mulgathing and Tolmer. And these also include areas that have some historical drill holes that were 5 and 10 gram per ton over several meters from surface, but were simply never followed up due to lack of funding. So we've got a very high value roadmap. We're taking a lot of historical data and we're taking a lot of new technology. And we're trying to generate 3, 4, or 5 different tools that are pointing at specific targets and saying, drill here, dummy, and then we're going after those. So we're very, very careful about where we spend our money. We're doing a lot of technical work to make sure we're aiming properly. But the result is that everything that we are doing, we are converting into successful new mineralization, which has been quite positive. When we step down to Tarcoola's sister project, Tunkillia, just for a bit of reminder, again, we're about 70 kilometers south and in a very different geological setting. So this is about a 1,300 square kilometer tenement package across which we have about 50 kilometers of strike of large scale shear zones. So this is the Yurta shear zone and the Jarlbrinda shear zone. Now, we're primarily focused at the moment on the Jarlbrinda shear zone. There's about 30 kilometers of strike there across our exploration license 5901. And up in the northwest corner of that exploration license is where we have our 223 deposit. So that's a 965,000 ounce deposit across 2.5 kilometers of continuous strike. About 68% of that is in the indicated category. But we have a number of high priority satellite targets around it that we have started testing based upon new geophysical models. And we've had some early success validating essentially 2 for 2, testing those models for new mineralization. When we look at the 223 deposit as a starting point, what we can see in this cross section here is that this is mineralization that's typical of large scale shears. So this is nice hosted mineralization. It's very broad, highly continuous mineralization, anywhere from 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 meters across. And when we were modeling this before our IPO, we thought there were some higher grade zones within the deposit. And you can see these sort of indicated here in this sort of orange color. And this happens, we believe, where there is vein swarming against mafic dikes that act as the footwall of this mineralization. So this mineralization unto itself is interesting because if we validate that high grade mineralization, then indeed there are some very interesting development opportunities there, including optimization of your development plans. but also then looking around this mineralization. And again, to put this in context, that 223 deposit is here outlined in black and magenta. We have a huge body of historical data from shallow pattern Rabin air core drilling that was never followed up, dating back to the 1990s. And what we can see here in the vicinity of the 223 project is a footprint of multiple satellite targets, Centurion, Area 51, Area 191, among others, where there are a large number of historical positive exploration results. And all of these circles here, I think it's important to note, these are not geochemical results. These are drill holes with drilling results between 1 and 10, or even up to 50 grams per ton in some holes. So what have we done with this? Well, we have gone after this very aggressively, again, bringing a lot of new tech in, reinterpreting a lot of the geology. And what we have done is converted 2 of these satellite targets into new gold zones. So what we're doing is essentially confirming that the Tunkillia project is part of the 223 deposit, I should say, is part of a much larger mineralized system, and rapidly building that project footprint. So where we before here had the Centurion target, we've now converted that into a new 800-meter long gold zone we've called 223 North. Area 191, we have also drilled and converted into a new 650-meter long gold zone. And that represents, on top of that 223 deposit, about a 60% strike in total mineralization there. Now, we did that from only about 4,000 meters of drilling across those 2 areas, but we also identified, as I mentioned, that higher grade zone. So we went and tested that theorized higher grade zone, and we validated that. So one hole, for example, had over 40 meters of combined mineralization intersected at grades between 2 and 5 gram per ton within this broader resource that's modeled at about 1.15 gram per ton. So we're basically really expanding the footprint here. We're sort of filling in the picture. And this year's drilling during 2022 is going to aggressively target further expansion of these new gold zones, but also conversion of new gold zones, new mineralization. We would like to fill in this footprint, and we think that this ground really has the potential to do this along both the western and eastern demagnetized margins of those shear zones. Importantly, the 223 North and Area 191 new mineralization that we discovered was actually targeted and drilled based upon some new predictive modeling we generated based on geophysics. And what's really interesting about this modeling is that we have put together essentially a relationship, or a series of relationships relating to magnetic susceptibility and resistivity coincident with gold mineralization. And where we have theorized and tested the presence of gold mineralization and its orientation are the 223 North area and Area 191. And both times we validated that model. So this model predicts the repeat of this style of mineralization far down and beyond the current boundaries of sort of our working area. So when we look at this area up here, which is several kilometers long by several kilometers wide and has the potential to host, if this exploration and sort of discovery pace continues, this could have the potential to host a couple million ounces of gold. What we're looking at here is the potential to step down the next 20 kilometers of mineralization. So we really look at Tunkillia as a project that has been known about for a very long time, but it has received very little attention and funding for the past 20 years. And we think that was quite a significant mistake. So we're spending a lot of time focused on this. When we look at this image, you can see the area where my cursor here is, that is nearly 1 million ounces. So the potential just in the northern areas is significant for a camp scale development, but we really do see this as a district scale potential opportunity. So for the next 12 months, what are we going to be doing? Again, we have formulated a very strong view of where we need to go. We're going to be looking to extend that new Perseverance West gold zone that we identified at the open pit at Tarcoola. And we're going to be looking to step out and really significantly expand the discovery footprint of the Tarcoola project. So testing those near mine shallow targets, but also stepping out to regional targets where all of our geophysical work and geochemical work is telling us that we should go and drill and target new discoveries. At Tunkillia, again, we'll be looking to significantly extend that new 223 North gold zone. It's currently about 800 meters long. We believe it could be up to 2 kilometers long, which would nearly match the existing 223 deposit's footprint. And then again, we'll be looking to step out, test and validate other satellites in the area, and then continue to build that exploration model down the next 5 to 10 kilometers of host structure there. And the summary purpose of this, of course, is to continue converting targets to new gold mineralization, convert that mineralization to new JORC resources, and to end 2022 with a very substantial JORC resource upgrade that gives us a very solid base for a large-scale development PFS. So essentially, we've proven our exploration thesis, and we're now really leaning into that. We're going to be commencing about 20,000 meters of drilling from April, along with a bunch of other different additional geochemical and geophysical work projects. So we'll be looking to really keep things very busy this year, and I believe we should have some very exciting news all along the way. So, I guess by way of short summary, we really sort of look at ourselves as somewhat unique in the market. We are the only pure South Australian gold developer. Sounds a bit strange to say, but it's true within the ASX. And we really are sort of the scale, momentum, and value play, if you like, Australian listed, Australian open pittable, large scale gold projects. We restrict our comparables analysis to only companies that sort of strictly fit that domain. And there's sort of 7 or 8 companies that we would consider our peers in the market. What you can see here on the screen in front of you is a basic analysis of these projects, the resources that they have in the black bars, the enterprise value per resource that they're valued at on the market are the gray bars. And on average, these true peers, if you will, are valued at about $90 per ounce in enterprise value, whereas we're valued at just under $30. So again, if this is a development prospect that you like, or this is the style of story that you like, we would propose that we're quite a deep value opportunity, not least of which because of all the explorers that you see here, we are the only ones that also happen to have our infrastructure. So this valuation doesn't even consider ownership of the only gold mill in the region. So this year should be very exciting. Quite a bit of work kicking off soon. We expect to have a great deal of news flow, and we would be honored to have your support.